Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Good, Frank. Good to see you.
Yeah, same here. Good to see you.
We are back, my friend.
Yeah, how was your week?
It was great.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about yourself?
It was great. Trying to find another adjective to explain my week. They're always good. They're always great. It's all perspective, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And that's what we're here to talk to you guys about. So thanks again for joining us this week.
Yep, it's going to be a fun week and podcast. I hope.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to enjoy it myself, so we'll see what we're going to dive into. All right.
Where should we start tonight?
Well, take us on a journey. You start the journey and see where it ends up. I think it's storytelling time.
Okay, so I got actually a good one. So this week,
a priest and a rabbi walk into a bar.
No, that'd be great. Start though. No, this week I actually had a good friend of mine come up to me and kind of share some stuff.
Ramdas?
No, yeah.
In your sleep.
Yep,
yeah.
Exactly. So this gentleman, he came up to me and we talk about these ideas of awakening, consciousness, at length.
Stuff you talk about all day long.
But like this information is not new to this guy, and it's something that we both share in common. And he comes to me and he was saying, hey, I've been seeing a therapist these last few weeks. I've been wanting to, kind of get some sort of diagnosis, right? Is what he says to me. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, cool.
I'm scared to be diagnosed.
Tell me more. And he's like, well, that's actually, why I wanted to talk to you tonight. I got my diagnosis.
Right on.
And I was like, oh, really? And I was like, okay. So, playing in the game, tell me more, right?
Yeah.
That's how I kind of dive into it. So what's your diagnosis, friend? And so I had to write this down. So I actually
when you have to write it down,
Well, no, so I would know what the name of it is, but it's short. It's like SRS is what he said, and it was stress. Hold on, I emailed it to myself, so I wouldn't forget. I have to
see the fact that we have to email to ourselves means it's part of the
myself.
made-up game, but nonetheless, we're in the game to play. Yeah.
Here we go. Stress response syndrome.
Or
adjustment disorder. And so I'm like, oh really?
I think
feeding into the game.
I think we all have that.
And so he explains it to me, and he sent me this link, and this is what I'm looking at. So adjustment disorder, stress response syndrome, is a short-term condition that happens when you have great difficulty managing with or adjusting to a particular source of stress, such as a major life change, loss, or event. So I read this, and immediately my mind says, well, that's every single person has this, In
this game,
yeah, exactly. That's the awakening, realizing we're trapped in this, four-corner game.
Yeah.
But it's something different happened when my friend was explaining this to me. I could see this immense relief in his eyes. Because
what do you think the diagnosis is going to be?
He's been struggling with depression. And so when we talk about things, it's always, in this context, this, foggy view of, this horrible experience, this struggle, this pain. And I naturally try to, allow my heart to open up and for him to see there is no pain unless you attach to it. This is sensation. This is, a condition, repeated mind pattern, that you're falling into, and it will continue to repeat. That's what karma is. It will come in different forms, etc. But I'm here to listen. I'm not here to diagnose because at the end of the day, that's not what Frank and I are trying to do. But what Frank and I are trying to do is show you that, okay, so this immense sign of relief I could see in his face, I'm not depressed. I don't have major depression. And it blew my mind because I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow, imagine if that diagnosis said major depression, which it very well could have.
Yeah,
imagine that little flip of the coin, and his reaction to that would have been, oh my goodness, my life is over. Mm-hmm. I've got this disease. I've been diagnosed. I've been branded. It must be true. Mm-hmm. I must live by this statement. And it hit me that, like, wow, what we're trying to talk about and what we want people to see is that life is any way you look at it. And you can make something a big of a deal as you'd like or as small as a deal as you'd like. And to hand your power away and think that, wow, if that came back a different way, my entire being, my entire way of interacting with people would forever be changed. How detrimental that is. And so, like, Frank and I, when we talk about these concepts, and what we're like really pointing out is we want you to see that operating system from above. That, wow, whatever meaning I give to something, or whatever view I assign or perspective I look at something, is how it is and is how it will be played out.
Yeah, how you experience it.
It's how you experience. Absolutely.
So the suggestibility from this, I'm assuming it was a doctor who gave him this diagnosis.
Yeah.
Created suggestibility. And, it's interesting the doctor had to give the person something, because the doctor said, there's nothing wrong with you. I'm sure your buddy would not believed, because obviously I'm here. So, what's interesting is even a doctor, you look at someone like Sigmund Freud, all the concepts and ideas he came through is how, like, to reveal the human psyche, were concepts that he went through and assumed that every human being, if it goes through this, must have some ill relationship with their mother, relating to sexual stuff. But he can only pull up this concept through him and then project it onto other people. And what happens is we bought into it until until Jung came along, which was in the same contemporary field, and almost had the opposite understanding. And even here, we're not suggesting anyone take a look at something and pull away from the game, but we are we're very suggestive characters. And if you allow someone to suggest you in a place that's not preferential to you, you're going to feel pain. But obviously your friend liked the diagnosis, and I could go into understanding to some level that the doctor that came up with this diagnosis wanted him to feel better as well, assuming your friend is a male. And because the concept onto it, because if the doctor was having a bad day and was depressed, he might have pushed upon them depression. And that's why as I sit here, and I'll say this often, because once in a while I'll misspeak and I'll say most people. I don't know most people. I only know the concepts in which I lived in the lifetime in which I deem my lifetime as a memory of a lifetime. And even those concepts are fleeting. So do I really know them? The one thing I do come to know is the witnesser of all of the concepts I have myself, or personas I have myself. Kind of like what the director does to every character on the set. The director is a witness to all the different personas, the people playing out. But the director isn't them. But the director needs to direct them and have the experience of them. So here in the physical world, the persona isn't to be tossed to the side, but it's to be given direction. And who better to direct than to your higher self, other than some Conrad in front of you that you think they know more than you, which they don't. They only know based on their personas and their experience walking through this world. And the greatest philosophers of all times, everyone from Socrates to Aristotle, they all came to a conclusion they don't know. Or what they do know is they know nothing. And when we come to that conclusion, get to a place where you think you know. Do it. It's a useful tool. But it'll lead you down this path to a dead end to realize, I don't know. And like, okay, now that you don't know, step into the unknown. And this is where the fun is. Why when we were children, and I'm saying we, as I experienced this, and a lot of people, or the people I've talked to have experienced this in the same thing, when they stepped onto a playground or onto a beach or amusement park for the first time, the excitement was the unknown. They didn't know. But once you tell the child the reason you're happy is because of the roller coaster, and how many times in the roller coaster does a kid get until they diminish the value of the excitement? But it wasn't the roller coaster, it was their feeling. The roller coaster just happened to be an expression of it. So as we are here, so we can't go back to ignorance like we were as children, but we could step into this place in which we deemed or label as wisdom. And wisdom can actually place in front of us the present moment, heading into the unknown, and then experiencing life anew like we did as children. So yeah, the physical body needs a task, but the mind doesn't need any more knowledge. Matter of fact, the mind gathers knowledge through the experience of the body in the three-dimensional world. So as I step forth and do something, just my mind allowing me to be present sends in information through excitement or impulse. And then the body wants to get up and do stuff. Why are you doing it? I'm like, I don't know. It's leading me somewhere. So I go and I do it. And all of a sudden, I start having these experiences. And through the experiences, my mind, the corporeal mind, starts to know new stuff. But trying to read a book on something that I haven't done yet, I don't know when this information is going to come about. Now, reading the book, there's nothing wrong with that. It might compel me to step into the unknown. Just because I read about mountain climbing doesn't make me a mountain climber. But it might lead me into letting go of the fear of mountain climbing, so it has a useful place in this. But it will not make me a mountain climber. What makes me a mountain climber is climbing the mountain. And that unto itself you can't find in a book. You must do it. But you have to be present in order to set forth, and the excitement will generate. Next thing you know, you found yourself at the base of a mountain and heading up. And that's when the experience begins. It doesn't end there, but it begins there. And as we start to do this, we're literally putting the horse in front of the carriage. But when you stay still and present with the mind, impulse will come through, giving the body a job to do something. But you don't really know why you're doing it. I can make up stories. Why did you do that? Well, Jim, I did this because... But we really don't know. But we did it for the experience, for the elation of experience, whether it was a high or a low. You know, to me, it's all good. I'm realizing that. Because in the physical world, what makes up the physical world, and we know it, is a wave. You got a crest and a trough. If you slice that in half and just hold on to the crest, there is no life. You need the trough. You need the opposite in order to fulfill life. So life is a complete wave, which has every variable in the wave. So to think you're only going to hang out on the crest of it and height of it is mistaken. Where Great Depression comes in is trying to hold on to, or just focusing on that as you go up and down this. But if you stay present here, 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 and here, it's all exhilarating. Yes, you're going to feel different in the low than you are in the high, just like a roller coaster. Boom, your stomach goes here. As you come up, it drops back down. You go here, it comes back up here. That's the purpose of it. But, you know, the suffering is trying. If I was trying to hold on to the top of the roller coaster, I would suffer greatly because my arm would get ripped off.
And that's the awareness that we're talking about, being aware of all of that. The need for the positive, the negative, the yin, the yang, the light, the dark, without the experience of a devastation. You can't have this high of just beautiful bliss. There wouldn't be this spectrum for us to judge, because that's all mind. We have everything is just a isness. It is a we assign the meaning by a projecting meaning upon something.
Yeah, everything's a prop.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we say isness or being, that is what we apply or what we assign a meaning to. Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, with this friend, you know, tell me about it, you know, his doctor and everything like that.
So what's interesting is...
he gives away this power to the outside world by saying, you know, this is what I have, you know. Yeah. At the same time, though, it enables him to feel like, yes, it's not as bad as I thought. And so you see the suffering tugging at both sides.
Yeah, because even if he's holding on to that. But which is interesting is once the doctor gave your buddy the diagnosis, his whole physiology changed. So the doctor would, in that moment, would have to re-diagnose.
Truly.
He's no, because if you're smiling like, oh my God, you no longer have that anxiety. Whatever. Isn't that interesting though?
Stress.
Yeah. And again, I'm not taking away from this because we came here on Earth. It's like a game we're playing, whether it's football or whatever. And even from the history of football, or any game, rules and regulations have changed over time. And they have. So people are like, oh my God, there's these new diagnoses that weren't around 20 years ago. I'm like, yeah, because the game's changing. But the thing is, don't fall into it. Don't like hold on to it. Don't make that who you are, but play into it. Just like an actor takes a role, and whether they play a king or a madman, they aren't that. They're the witness or the persona they're playing.
And that's why you can't be diagnosed. Because, yes, in that moment, sure, you have stress-reducing disorder, whatever it was,
Yeah.
And like Frank just said, as soon as, oh, great, it's not depression. Everything fell away. You're a new person. And so we're taking these diagnoses and living by it and saying, nope, I'm this person. I must always be in pain because I've been diagnosed as this.
Yeah.
And we all do this in society, like with different things. Oh, I'm ADHD. I can't do anything. Oh, I'm an introvert. I can't possibly do that. Guys, you're putting yourself in this little weird box.
Because what it is there are concepts that people hold on to. When you just said that, it reminded me of a scene from Good Will Hunting, where they realized that he has this genius mathematical brain of his, so he could do math, but he has a social issue, which the professor from MIT, actually, I think he was going because he was arrested, so they made him go to see a therapist, right? And that was part of his
tuition.
Not tuition. No, he was like, I think he was going to go to jail, or he was pulled out. So it was part of his sentence, if you will. So he had to go see a therapist, and he went through a slew of therapists. And I remember the one he was sitting on there, and the guy put him under hypnosis, and he's like, they're tugging at me. And I can't remember what he was saying, but then he broke out of it and started singing, skyrocketing night, afternoon delight. And the therapist like, what are you doing? Like, he played the therapist, but it was an even game. Why? Because the therapist was playing him, even though the therapist was playing him in what he called an integrity field, but you're still making up a diagnosis. And why is this person demonized as mad? Because he doesn't do everything that everyone wants him to do in the way he wants to do. And sometimes, too, it works this way. When people are told to do something, they do the opposite. They're just as controlled. So I'm not saying that in this character, but he acted out because people didn't want him to want to do that. So acting out, you're still being controlled by the puppet master, just the opposite end of the strings, so to speak. But it brings attention to the awareness of that, because this character, played by Matt Damon, didn't buy into the game of, this is who I am. I don't want to be different. This is who I am. Can't you accept me for who I am? And that was a struggle in that field. But that's the struggle of life. I think that's what people gravitated towards that movie, because everyone can be the therapist, and everyone could also be Will Hunter in that situation. So we can't really, but it's a game. And we look at games, well, who plays it better? Well, who outsmarts the other person? But the wise man it sits in the game, but doesn't really play along with the game. They just move with the wind, like a sail does on the ocean.
Because we're just playing against ourselves.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with it. But as long as you know it's a game, you don't get caught up and hung up in it. You don't lose yourself in it. But sometimes losing yourself in it for a moment can create an immense experience. That's why we do it. Just like an actor, there are moments when an actor gets into a role and they forget they're the actor. They forget they're Matt Damon, and he believes he's Goodwill or Will Hunter. Mm-hmm. But yet he has to do that in the moment to sell it to the audience. But yet at the same time, Matt Damon knows he's Matt Damon, just playing a role which he had written into life and just laid it out. But it might be an inner concept that he had, but it was safer to play out in a movie than it was in real life for him, or who knows. We don't know, and I'm not going to sit there and try to figure that's how it is, but I can only go off the concepts of how I do it. But by watching these different things outside, I realize we are all the same, just having a different experience. And I don't know. Is it bad to be? What's that disorder again?
Stress something disordering.
Is it bad to be that?
Hold on.
Well, it's funny.
I want to make sure we address it because it's funny.
What's funny is what's
stress
the
response system.
All right, so
syndrome.
But the fact that
stress response
your buddy
syndrome.
thought that was better than being depressed is very interesting to me.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Some people are like, I'd rather be depressed than stressed.
Yeah.
You know?
So no. He preferred to be the stress rather than depressed.
But somebody else might rather be depressed than stressed.
Oh, I see.
So if
what
they
you're
were given
saying.
that order, they would be pissed off. I'd rather be depressed than
And
have
that's
it.
what Frank and I are getting at, guys. Everything is perspective. And to think that
that's
something that comes from the outside world is going to change how you forever feel about yourself, that's completely, I don't want to say foolish because that's not the right word. It's completely ludicrous. You would never want to allow...
allowing people to control your thoughts and feelings serves a purpose till it's needed no longer. And that's the greatest thing, because
when you're in the dance,
because exactly. How did I come to this place? Because my early personas and what I call life were told what to do, and I did it. And I was told I wasn't smart or whatever. I'm just using these different different forms of people projecting onto me because they were older. They must know more and better than I, so therefore they must be right. But then there was something in me. It was like, go fuck themselves. I'm like, seriously, they don't know. But there was something innate in me. Because think about this.
Truth.
If they were true, why would I get upset? I get upset because innately I knew empirically they weren't true. But this is part of the game that we came here for. So we end up in a world right now where, like, I hear a lot of people come up to me and say, what do you think about all this political correctness, this and that? And I laugh at it. I'm like, because it's funny. I'll say politically incorrect stuff all the time, but I do it, well, at least I hope I do it in a facet when I'm present with people that don't get offended. But then they're like, if you said that out loud in public, people get offended. But then I'm like, who are these people that would get offended? And I'm sure that people out there get offended, but when I stay conscious, I knew who to say. I know there's a certain joke I would say to a buddy, but I certainly wouldn't say it to his mom. And that's just simple awareness. And if people say that, and now I hear a lot of people talking about political correctness. Again, it's a suggestibility thing. But they're talking about it like it's wrong. It's wrong. But I don't hear anyone talking about the rightness of it. I think we peaked that. But everyone's talking about, I can't stand this political correctness. I'm like, well, then don't play the game, because now you're going to be the one creating a political correctness in that we ought not to do that. No one should tell me I can't say anything. They ought not to tell me that. Well, now you're trying to correct their politicalness of something. And it becomes this funny game. Mm-hmm. What really makes it funny is what comedians are brilliant at this. They take it right to the line, and then they step over it real quick and come back, and they laugh, because how is laughter created? Through a quick shift of perspective. And because you have it in a light place, I believe that some of the greatest speeches that were ever made on whether it was racism or joining together did well for society, but a comedian did so much more. And what I mean is, you take a comedian like Eddie Murphy. I believe, and again, this is my perspective, he did more for racism than anyone else holding a serious speech, because he showed the world through his comedic, telling stories about his childhood, and being a white. And actually, I grew up in the town next to him. I grew up in a town called Merrick. He grew up in Roosevelt. And I'm listening to his stories, and they weren't that much different, other than the adjectives and the excitement they drew out. But yet, he was a child just like I was, and it was relatable. But then I got to understand a different culture that I knew, even though it was separated by a parkway, I didn't know this culture. And all of a sudden, I could not like the guy. And so all of a sudden, it's like, oh, it's interesting. And then when he started playing roles on Saturday Night Live like Buckwheat, all of a sudden, when you look back at that time and era when they were playing like the Little Rascals, and you had like Stymie and Buckwheat, how they were treated or meant to act was absurd. But how would we know they were absurd until he came out and played Buckwheat on Saturday Night Live? So that type of stuff, but it didn't make a white person guilted for acting that way or thinking that way, because it was ignorance that made them do that. And everyone has ignorance. Once you know something and you say it or do it against it, that's the ignorance in which humanity could do without. But when you don't understand something, you didn't know it, that's like, everyone has ignorance to something. I have ignorance to knowing what the top of Mount Everest is because I've never been there. But it doesn't make me empirically ignorant. But nor would I sit and talk about the top of Mount Everest, because that would make me ignorant of the fact that I don't know what I'm talking about. But once someone like him came in, and what is comedic actions? It's taking a perspective and shifting so quick that everyone laughs. But there's no one shamed by it. So when you take, and that's what laughter is, it's shifting perspective. You're heading this way, and you go there. It's like you're telling a story, and you think it's going to go this way, and you make a hard right, and then you start laughing because you didn't see it coming. So perspective shifts about laughing, by the way, and storytelling. Truly. Yeah, and this is how we get together. Because if I could tell a story about myself and how I was raised and how, and people are like, oh my God, it was cool. I'm like, no, to me, it's funny. I'm like, the relationship I had with my dad was forever comedic. Like, he wasn't cruel. But if I tell the story in a very bland way, I'm like, what? Your dad did what? I'm like, no. He did it out of love, Like the time I was telling the story to somebody where I was, my dad was early on, he was my boxing trainer. He taught me how to box since I was a little child. And, well into him training, I think I was like 13 years old. We're in the ring, and he looks at me, he goes, put your hands down. I'm like, what? Just put your hands down. I put them down. And he jabbed me right in the face. Bam! I'm like, what the hell? He goes, don't ever put your hands down. Right? It's like,
best lesson you ever learned.
Well, because if he told me never to put my hands down, I might have mentioned this before, but I would have never learned anything. But if you tell the story, people are like, your dad was abusive. I'm like, no, I didn't laugh at the time. Trust me, he laughed, But yet, that's what he was doing. He wasn't out to kill me. He was just showing me something, because I'm in a sport where you must get used. If you don't like get hit in the face, you're in the wrong sport. Well, I shouldn't say like. It's if you don't know what it's like to get hit in the face, you're in the wrong sport, because the object is try not to get hit. But unless you're like Boom Boom Mancini, one of those guys, they love to get hit. Rocky Graziano.
The pain.
Oh yeah, they love it. But I wasn't one of those people. I didn't like to get hit. And my dad. But when I tell that story, to me, it's the funniest story to tell. Now at the time, I'm like, what the hell? Seriously, you're my dad. What do you do this shit for? But that was his way of conducting how he showed he loved me. He never used the words "I love you." He just. But it came off him, and he ridiculed me throughout my life. I called it ridicule. He raised me through ridiculous humor. It wasn't funny at the time for me.
It's just so funny because we have these projections and ideas about our parents, the same type of expectations that we hate that they put on us. Mm-hmm. And we look at them and we're like, a father ought not to do this. A mother should never. A mother ought to do this. And says who?
Says what? Yeah. I believe instinctively that training
but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We constantly, and so we get upset when our parents don't live out to our expectation of who we thought they must be. And how ridiculous of a concept that is, that my mother or my father should have played out a role that is sufficient in my mind, in my expectation, my mind-created idea of how this ought to have been.
But the thing about it, where did this idea come from? Watching Happy Days?
Conditioning.
But I'm saying, until I'm watching Happy Days and Father Knows Best, I'm like, I thought this is how every child in America lived.
It's how we sculpt our culture, our media, our music, our videos, even down to how we present stuff in school.
Yeah, but I'm saying before you even heard any of that stuff, for me, I thought it was natural to have a sparring match with your dad in the living room. Then I realized I'm the only kid in the neighborhood who knows how to box. I'm like, but then you go out there, you're watching a program. Years ago, I used to call them programs for good reason. So you're watching like Leave It to Beaver and then Happy Days, and you're like, I'm like, holy shit, I live a different life than these people. But like, who is selling this concept? It's not that concept's wrong. It just gives you diverseness. And then along came Good Times. So here I'm a white kid watching an all-black family, how they treat themselves. And I realized the dad is using ridiculous humor onto the child. I'm like, okay, it's probably more relatable than Happy Days for me, because my parents didn't have conferences, and my dad just threw punches at me and said stuff. So it was interesting and it's not that, it's the actions, and the way I look at it is the relatable side of it, not what they look like, what they do stuff. And it doesn't mean because I can't relate to you doesn't mean I don't love you either. And it gets to the idea, when I heard someone say this concept, I thought it was brilliant. Humans can look at one another and look at somebody and say, what the hell's wrong with them? And that's what therapists do. But yet, has a human ever looked at a mountain and say, what's wrong with that mountain? What's wrong with that tree? What's wrong with that flower? No, because they don't know enough to know what's wrong, and they don't know enough to know what's wrong with a human being. I feel the only thing that's wrong is thinking you're wrong. When you really come down to the crux of it, we're all having experiences. I don't know if experience is right or wrong. Now, I wouldn't prefer to do that thing that person over there is doing, but I'm not that person, and nor do I want everyone to be doing what I'm doing, because it can't come to fruition. Hitler tried that, and look how it ended up for him. He got lost in the concept that everyone ought to think like him, and I almost said look like him, but the people he imaged in this perfect world didn't even look like him, which was even more absurd. But maybe he wanted to stand out even in that world. But nonetheless, it came to an end for him. That idea collapses. But when you live and let live, it's great. Can you imagine you learned how to play guitar and you said everyone in your band must play guitar? Oh my God, there's no percussions. What about singing? We don't need that. So now you just have one loud guitar on stage. It's a diversiness. But yet, I stick with my game, play it, and then I match it up or play against that game. And I learn something. Wow. And I grow from it. And I expand. And through expansion, what does expansion teach me? To stop holding on. It hurts. This is where pain comes from. Expansion is a natural entity in this physical world and out throughout the universe beyond the physical world. And if you hold on to something, it's like holding on to two trains going in the opposite direction. Hold on to one and let go of the other, or else it's going to rip you in half.
Let's step back to what you said about the mountains, because like that's a great point. When we're looking at people, we look at people so much different than we would a mountain, a tree.
We ought to think
flower.
they're supposed to act this way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's because there's this meaning assigned to them. There's this. They're this gender. They're this culture. They're this race. They're this, that. And it's the mind assigning, and saying, okay, where does this go into my algorithm? So when we can see that that's simply just a mind pattern, you kind of can step away and you can begin to look at people for what they are, which is just light, their spirit, their soul, their...
Yeah, and then the persona that they protrude or reflect onto the world through the light, you'll actually enjoy. It doesn't mean you have to do that. And there are times where you have to leave the room because they're too much, but nonetheless, it's... and I might not prefer to hang out with that type of persona, but nor do I need to knock it or fix it.
Exactly.
I don't need to fix it. I just need to move to another town.
It is. You allow it to be.
Yeah, you let it to be.
You know?
And if you allow, like, I could allow Alaska to be if I want to be in a warm climate with, sand. But if I try to fix Alaska, I don't know if this is true. And I remember when I was a kid, I heard that scientists were trying to create this huge mirror up, like in the North Pole, especially, or the North Pole area in the region, and I guess they felt that the ice caps were getting too big back then, to reflect the sun down onto the earth to help melt that part of the ice caps. And I'm thinking to myself, for one, I might have heard this, someone talking about it. It might have been complete bullshit. But the fact that a human being thinks,
Honestly,
let's
this
make a
whole
big mirror. I'm like,
thing we're talking about is
I'm
complete
thinking, like,
bullshit.
I'm like, don't you think it was already built perfectly?
We call it reality.
Yeah, it's like the guy who puts the whale tail on a freaking Toyota. I'm like, why are you doing that? I'm like, the car doesn't go fast enough to need the aerodynamic to drive it down onto the floor. It looks cool. I'm like, yeah, this is kind of weird.
Does it, though?
It's kind of weird, but that's my perception, though. I don't mean to knock that. But the effect this is a whale tail on the car is to, if it goes so fast, the aerodynamics will keep the lower end of the back car. So there is an effectiveness to it. That's why it's put there. But we just put it on the back of your Toyota that can only do like 90 miles an hour going downhill. Yeah, you really don't need it. But then it's just for show. But why would someone want to heat up Alaska? You have Hawaii. You have the equator. Stay the hell out of the poles. Because we don't know. Humans go a place and like, oh, they're trying to meddle in here, and they don't know. But step into the unknown and just enjoy the environment which you're in. And then the feedback and information will come to you, and you'll know what to do. When you're in Hawaii, you go surfing. When you're in Alaska, you go ice fishing.
See, the thing about the analytical mind is we go down these crazy rabbit holes.
I'm glad I didn't have a great analytical mind. I had a lot less to get over. No, seriously. I was like,
You
hey.
made it real easy for me to lose that thing.
I was halfway there, baby. I was like, it's like, you're an idiot. I'm like,
I love this. I love this awakening shit.
know what it's like? It's like you're at a starting line, right? And everyone starts running.
No thought. This is great.
Yeah, everyone starts running, but you're tying your shoes. Then you realize they ran the wrong way, and I'm like, "Fuck, I'm ahead of these people." Once I tie my shoelace, I'll run the right way. That's what I felt like. Yeah, I was ahead of the game, but I didn't know it. I was told. Yeah.
I love how we describe it. like it matters.
Yeah.
Or like it exists.
Yeah.
What's funny about it, or where I guess I was going with that, was we are.
I shifted Mike's perspective, and he's laughing now.
Well, no, I just think it's funny. Kind of like what I was telling you about. So we have when you look at yourself, there's I've heard this described multiple ways, okay? So Ram Dass likes to describe this kind of as like 3 planes of consciousness, okay? Mm-hmm. You've got like these 3 different planes. I've heard Muji, love him, talk about it as the 2 birds, where you're the bird and then the witness, of the bird. And then you can even witness those birds, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's this guy a lot of people don't know about him, but his name's Jesus. But no, truly, a lot of people don't know Jesus, the actual. There's so much mind created over this man that it's like, well, you have to peel back the layers and see that he was simply an enlightened being, and then we created this crazy story around him. But Jesus said, that the mind.
Well, everyone added their perception to the story.
Absolutely. So Jesus.
Wait to hear mine.
But I love when he talks about this because he says like the Father, the Son, and then the Holy Spirit. So back then, he didn't have words like actor, director, audience. He didn't have terms like the creator, then the creation.
Yeah, well, it's who he's
to describe.
To.
Exactly. The way he described this feeling was, the Father, the Son, and then the Holy Spirit. So you are all 3. And that's what he's getting at when he's talking to us. That's what, Ram Dass is talking about with the 3 planes. That's what Muji's talking about with the 2 birds, and then witnessing of the 2 birds.
Yeah.
We are the creator, okay? And then we act through the creation. And this right now, this Maya, illusion, whatever you want to call it that we're in, we're playing a role. We're playing an actor right now. This is an experience. So when you get in the thinking mind, this analytical mind that Frank and I are encouraging you to step out of, think of the analytical mind.
Or step fully into it where it'll kick you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But this analytical mind is like the character you're playing in a game trying to think. Okay, so picture yourself like maybe like a Sims game, and you create this character and you're in this little, people are moving around, whatever. So when you're thinking in the analytical mind, it's like watching the character try to think, and that this character can't think his way out of whatever problem because this character only knows what it knows.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're experiencing right now. We only know what we have experienced and what our mind has assigned and categorized all of these experiences to. And then we live by that.
And that's what we call the ego self. The
Yes,
ego
correct.
records everything that the body experiences.
Correct. And so when we're acting or when we're in a position where we're trying to think our way out of it, it's quite funny because it's like watching this little character struggle like we're actually going to get somewhere. It's not until you let go and allow yourself to be, which is that knowing that truly intuition or the higher spirit, the Holy Spirit, can speak to you. And you know then what direction to move forward. So when we're caught in this analytical mind and trying to figure life out, and I got to do this and I ought to do that, watch the character struggling around for no reason. Rest in the knowing that whatever route you take, you're going to be just fine. It's in the path of least resistance that you begin to find this flow that you're looking for. But you're acting as if you're the character.
Yeah.
And you're not, you got to see that the character doesn't really have, that analytical mind that you're using isn't going to get you anywhere because it only knows what it knows. You have to let go of the analytical mind for the knowledge, the wisdom, the light to come to you.
Yeah. And that's just it, because the analytical mind can only get where you've been, so therefore you find yourself on the same block as you were yesterday or 3 weeks ago, and no new experience is gained. And innately, we are meant to expand into new experiences all the time. So expansion and change isn't something that humans do. It's something we experience. We have nothing to do with it. Just like we have nothing to do with gravity. But understanding gravity is why I don't jump off the building. I take the elevator. So... But gravity exists, and because I know how it works, that's why I choose the elevator rather than stepping off the top of the building, because that would be the end of the game for me. And as we talk about these principles, and understand one of the principles we're talking about is go within, and you actually create the persona of the person, because it is a game. You know, as I step onto a field, let's say, a football field, and I'm a quarterback, the quarterback, once he says hike, it's the unknown. Yes, he set a plan forth. But the defenders are going to disrupt that plan. And what makes a really quarterback, a quarterback is the ability to step into the unknown. But imagine the quarterback says, no, I must throw it to this person at this place. The game would be very difficult to play.
It's kind of like going to a movie, right? And it's like the big premiere and you're all excited, and then somebody comes in and they run to the front of the theater and they say, guys, this is how it ends.
Yeah.
And everybody in there is like, what?
Yeah, but even that wouldn't ruin the movie necessarily, because you need to see everything up to the point in which you do it.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We think we want this person to run in and tell us what it's going to be like. That's kind of what this struggle and tug
I like
is.
that now, because that's the analogy.
You see what I mean?
I love this brilliant analogy, because I tell people that. Everyone wants to, they think they want to know what's going to happen tomorrow.
We want that guy to run in.
And I'm like, do you really want to go to a movie that you've already seen or know what's going to end? No. So why do you want to live your life in that very facet?
You don't. You think you ought to. It's a mind pattern.
No, we don't. Stepping into the unknown is really why we came here. But and actually, we've talked about this before.
We're taught to always be secure, to be prepared.
Yeah,
guys, this is a condition. This is a condition.
Yeah, it burns energy actually, because they know this now. Do you know what burns the human condition more than anything else? And it's not time, or what we call aging. It's actually living a secure, repetitious life.
Yeah, what creates aging is that. I've heard that.
So it starts to break down the telomeres on your chromosomes.
Doing the same thing day in, day out.
Yeah, so if you step into the unknown. Now, you could literally live in the same house, same town for your whole life and still step into the unknown every day. It doesn't mean you have to travel the world to actually build up. But you can look at your town and your house differently every day. And when you do that, you can step into the unknown, and all of a sudden your body, from a scientific standpoint, starts to create telomerites, which actually repair the telomeres, which are the breakdown of what we call aging. But it has nothing to do with time. Time is just a mere measurement of the phrase in which we came. I came in this date, and I'm here now. That's just a measurement counting, just like the measuring this table doesn't make the table. It's just a measurement of the table, but it didn't create the table. It just measured it. So time doesn't create aging. in how we understand it. Time is just a measurement of it. What creates aging and how we look at aging is trying to keep a secure life and doing the same thing over and over. And that is the most inefficient thing to humans. And what's interesting about it is we innately know it's efficient. We know it's not working, but we don't know anything else, so we continue going around that. It's like getting stuck in those revolving doors. And after a while, you're just going to get dizzy. But we want to move in a path that is moving us into new experiences, not to get further from the point which we're in. But if I do this, circle, all of a sudden the experience becomes monotonous. But if I'm moving in a path, I'm not trying to get away from something. It just offers me new unknowns. And when I go into the unknown, it sets new neural pathways in my head. It fires up. All of a sudden, information comes through in the moment in which I need it, not before, not after. I don't need to read a book to go do something. I just do it, and then I could write the book, but what good is that? You know, all the books I've read taught me one thing, that it can be done, but not the way in which the person wrote the book. Because that's the time they wrote the book, it was done. It was over. So they're just reverse engineering their experience and writing it down. But that's not going to get me there, because that road is closed. It is done. So reading books led me to that place that I can do it. Maybe not the same thing, but I have the capacity to do it if I just change my perspective onto it, and then write your own book. Whether you write it down or type it down or publish it, doesn't matter. Your book is your story. Your story is your multitude of experiences that you're going to have. And the most exciting ones are the ones that you don't know about. You know? And it's like you talk to that person, like, how's your day going? Oh, good so far. Yeah. Because they anticipate something may happen. And guess what? Something will happen. And that's still stepping into the unknown, but it's not a preferred unknown.
Well, that's the thing. It's the unknown with the, I already know I'm going to hate this outcome. It's like my dad. It doesn't matter, but if we're going in public, he's not going to like it.
Your dad's listening to this right now. He's like,
you know, it's like, doesn't matter, you know, I'm all right for now, but as soon as, you know, those people get over to my house, I'm going to hate this.
Yeah. And the anticipation of, like, the person that, you know, upsets you will be a different face, a different person, but nonetheless, you'll find someone to piss you off.
But that same concept where we know how we're a thing's going to turn out. I can't wait to go to Thanksgiving this year with the family. Can you believe it?
See, I told you. Told you it was going to happen.
But this is the same thing like my buddy
That's
with
what
his
psychics
therapist.
do, by the way.
It's the same thing, looping back to the story
in
the beginning. It's the same thing. We're saying whatever this outcome is, I know it. You know, it's already going to be decided. It's all a perspective. It's all the mind. And when you can see it from the above, and wow, yeah, either way, I can make it.
Well, yeah, because another, like the Trinity that you expected, or the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, and how we look at Catholicism or some other places. Look at it this way. Let's take it down to an understanding. You have a quarter, and on a quarter is the heads and tails. So let's say the heads is the Father, the tails is the Son. The Holy Ghost, it's just a quarter. The value of the head isn't any greater than the value of the tail. If you try to slice and separate the two, you don't have any object you can deem worth 25 cents. But when you stand back, it's just a quarter. But people want to pin the head and the tails and say which is better. I'm like, that's just the most ridiculous thing. And that's what the Holy Spirit,
as you look every day in life,
you can see whether it's the head or the tail, it doesn't matter. But focus on one, because the attention you give to one will take care of the other thing easily. If I head west and focus west, east will be taken care of for me. All right? I don't need to worry about both, because I get nowhere. Doing this is what gives me a headache. You know? To what point do you have to look both ways in order to cross the street? If you continuously look both ways as you cross the street, you're not going to make it to the other end.
Let's jump into this real quick.
Let's do it.
Okay, so what you just described was awesome, because this is why we are all so tired all of the time. Okay,
Yes.
so I'm sure all of you at home have experienced
Me and
this.
Mike do this for 24 hours. We never get tired. I haven't slept in a week.
No, I'm sure everybody at home has experienced this, where you could sleep for 9, maybe 10 hours, and when you get up, you still feel tired and you're like exhausted. You're like, what the hell? Or let's say you slept for the perfect amount, 7.5, whatever your body, and you still don't have that feeling.
That's still suggested
It's
understandable.
because you're not tired. You are mentally exhausted. You are mentally drained.
You're draining the field of energy from the system. Yeah.
Correct. And so when you're stuck in these constant rhythm and patterns, like Frank was, what you were just describing, like so well, I ought to do this, I need to do that, must be done. You're constantly grabbing at attachment. If I give up one thought, if I don't remember this, my life will crumble as I know it. I will no longer be a fully functioning adult in this society. If I happen to miss this, you got to let it all go.
Yeah,
and you just have to know it's going to work.
Yeah, when you brought up the idea of memorizing stuff, I find this to be funny because anyone that's ever taken a test to get into a field, whether it's taking the LSATs or whatever for a doctor, or taking the pre-law test, whatever, you always ask them, like, the information that's provided on the test that you study, I'm like, do you ever use it in practice? Like, no.
Sweet.
Yeah, so I'm like, so why are you doing it? But everyone buys into the idea. It's like, well, it's a litmus test. It's to understand that I'm smart enough to get here. And I'm like, really? And I'm like, but
we live by these rules, guys.
Yeah,
and it's nuts.
imagine in order to go
loud.
to the gym, you had to study the same. Like, how does it help me work out? It just allows me in the gym, But yet we laugh at it. But people know it's ridiculous. But yet we still do it. It's this funny unsaid rule that no one's actually looked at. I'm like, and how I know this is weird, because there are people that never went to law school, or there are people that never went to medical school. And I'm using these as examples because they tend to pack on the most schooling and advancement of understanding, especially if you go into surgery or whatever. There are people that never went to medical school that pass themselves off for a doctor. Now, what's interesting is, like, oh, they faked being a doctor for 20 years. I'm like, well, they must have been good. What got them caught is something happened. Say a patient has died. Well, I don't know the stats on this, so I'm just going to make it up. But I imagine even surgeons or doctors that made it through med school had experienced a loss of a patient, because they're dealing with death a lot of times. But yet, when they looked into this gentleman, they looked deep enough to realize, well, he's gotten a license. How did he got here? But yet, he made it 20 years into the field of medicine practicing. How did he know? He didn't have to take the test, didn't go to school with the same people, but he somehow adequately did it to fool people that he was a doctor. It's interesting. Right? So now you go off into the jungle and you got some shaman, they call it, that knows more about the physiology of the body through frequencies and everything else, but they don't go to Harvard Medical School. They treat the body differently. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm not here to debate Eastern medicine from Western medicine. But in those societies, there's more of a pragmatic efficiency. If you're innately pulled towards healing people, that's what you'll do. Not status-oriented aspect. My mom wants me to become a doctor, so therefore I must be a doctor. And how many times we heard the story about the person who went to med school because their parents told them to do that? It's a very interesting concept. But once a person's a doctor and they're complaining about the parent made them, like, hey, at some point you have to let go of that story and do what you need to do. And some of the greatest stories I've ever heard, they were coaxed, they were talked into doing something. They did it. They realized it wasn't for me, and they found the greatest love of life doing something else. I'm like, well, you can't take out the part of the story of parents talking you into it, because that is the story. Would it be in its grandeur if you didn't?
And that's where the mind comes in.
Yeah.
It ought to be
so
this way.
Blaming the parents.
It can't be this way. It must have been.
Yeah.
You know, it needs to be the way I pictured it in order for this to be enjoyed, which is absolutely ridiculous. Not true at all. Nothing needs to be a specific way for you to enjoy it.
Yeah,
for this to be great.
And I want to finish the story off about like how sick my dad is.
Okay.
I remember like so obviously
Hell yes.
Yeah, boxing's my dad's life, and there was this series out called Loser, and the first episode was about a boxer, and I forgot the guy's name. I just briefly watched it. I just got a kick out of it, and I've seen the guy fight. He actually fight. He became he was a heavyweight champ for a short period, but he was talking about. He tells a story. I thought it was amazing. He's like he was sixth grade. He came home from school 6th grade to announce to his father he didn't want to box anymore. I'm like, he's in 6th grade. He already doesn't want to do it. And his dad beat him nearly to death. And then here he is telling the story about his boxing career, and he became a world champ at a short period of time. But then after that, when he realized it wasn't, he became a force in like, especially in movies. He trained actors for fighting. So his loser in the aspect, he lost in that he didn't really lose. It was almost like a paradoxical understanding of losing, right? So I'm telling my dad, like, yeah, his dad beat him nearly to death, and my dad's like, look where it got him. Maybe I should lay it into you a little bit. And I'm like, what? He goes, maybe I should have hit you a little harder.
Harsh.
It's like, what?
Harsh.
He goes, well, it worked, didn't it? I'm like, holy shit. And this is, obviously, my dad's just joking with me. But it's funny, but yet at the same point, it's like, it's interesting because we play this game. I remember watching the documentary on Tiger Woods and how his not only his dad was huff on him, but his mom was. And then we hear the story. It's like, oh, my God, it's cool. I'm like, it's a story. Yeah, just because you don't prefer to do that. Or maybe use an excuse, I don't play golf because my parents didn't beat me, or was good at boxing, my parents beat me. I'm like, it's another story. But it's his story, and it's not wrong. Even for Tiger Woods, this other guy. It's not wrong. It's just a story. Most people look, like, I didn't live that way. But like, yeah, but you're sitting there watching the guy. And I'm not saying if his dad didn't do that or his mom didn't do it, he wouldn't have been a great golfer. We will never know that. Or if this guy would have never made it, we will never know that. Because we don't really know that much. We really
like
don't.
to pretend that we do.
No, we don't. Yeah. That's why I have a head start.
That's the ego identity that we're living through.
And I don't know. Like, so some people like try to like, okay, I'm going to do the opposite of my kid, and they still end up with worries and troubles and stuff like that.
But why do we pretend like we know? Simply
because we allow the ego to slip in. Because this 3-card Monte game we're playing happens so quickly, 3 cards, but the slip of the wrist, you always pick the wrong card. It's because when you rely on your outside worldly views, such as sight, hearing, taste, touch, and hearing, you're missing the essence of what it really is. It's your internal system that created the ability to hear, to see, and all that other stuff. So a lot of times we rely too much on the outside world. That's where we miss the king of diamonds. Mm-hmm. And, we end up picking the king of spades, because we're focused on the outside world. We're focused on the hand that's dealing it, but it's shuffling it around. And we get bamboozled every time. Yep. And then we realize, and then we wake up. Awakening is not like, awakening to me is like, no way. No way. Right? So people have like these midlife crises. I have this midlife awakening, and I laughed. I'm like, holy shit, I knew it. Yes. I'm not an idiot. Yeah.
This doesn't suck.
Yeah. Dad, I'm not an idiot.
There's more to this.
Yeah, my dad's like, yeah, don't get ahead of yourself. It's like, but it's true. It's because we rely on the outside. Now, the outside world, the senses we have that refer to the outside world, such as hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, and all these outward and smelling. I don't want to miss one because somebody's like, hey, you missed one. I missed a lot, trust me. They're the recorders of the experience in which the inner world steps into the unknown to have.
I love that you just said the recorder of the experience, because that's what they are. It is. Because as soon as the taste, touch, smell, hear, as soon as that comes in, our mind in pattern assigns a meaning. You like this, you don't like this. This is bad, this is good. And then it gets filed away, and then we say that's truth. And it's we're trying to
fleeting.
get you to see all this system.
Yeah.
See what's going on. See the operating system from above. That you're not the creation. You created the creation, and you're witnessing all of it happening.
Yeah. Well, the essence of you is the creator of the experience in which you're having through perception. But everything is fleeting in the outside world. Even the great slice of pizza I'm eating will disappear. But what keeps me moving forward is there's a pizzeria on every corner that's going to continue to make me pizza. So I don't panic. Same thing goes with money, people. Money is just an object that's continuously printed, especially through the U.S. government.
Yeah.
It's funny when people say, oh, my God, they keep printing money. I'm like, they've always printed money. People everyone always has this place where they feel like they're on solid ground is when we should close the gate. It's like I was talking to somebody. It's like, oh, my God, people are moving in droves here from California and other places. We need to shut this place down. I'm like, yeah, because you're in the door. I'm like, what happens if you were one of those people wanting to get in? It's like, oh, I'm sorry, we can't let any more in. It's always the person that's inside the property that says, close the gate.
Keep them out.
Yeah, you ever watch a movie it's always like these old medieval types who have the castle and they have the big doors that take forever to close, and the people running and they're like, sorry, click, and they just because they're in, right? If they're on the other side, like, motherfucker, let me in. And they're rolling, trying to squeeze in. That one guy always gets stuck in the middle and his head's chopped off and shit, right? Just trying to get in the gate. Yeah. Close the gate.
Great visual.
Yeah. And you're never going to run out. So the thing is, if they close the gate, sit on the side of the door and pretend you're dead. They'll leave you alone. Trust me. Just play possum. That's what I do. I put right?
I like that.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. So remember, you never run out.
No.
Everything's here. But as you move forward, it appears. As I move from breakfast to lunch, a new meal appears. As I move from lunch to dinner, a new meal appears. But I don't worry about dinner unless I forgot to make the reservations. And Karen's going to be like, did you not make the reservations? I'm like, it's not really my thing. I don't make reservations. I just show up.
Hey.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Karen. I love Karen. I promise I'll make reservations next time. It freaks her out. It's funny. We have this game like I'll just show up somewhere, and she's like, "Oh, I think so. We're not going to get in." I'm like, "No, come on. We'll get in there. We always get in." But it's not the way I thought of. You have to be open to. I can't have this table or that table. You just have to be open to even sit at the bar, and I don't have a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
You need to see. But when we go away somewhere, like to Hawaii or something, and she wanted to go to the restaurant, and I didn't make the reservations. Even though we got into the place and didn't make the reservations, it was the anxiety she can do without. So now I'll make the reservations to not have her have the anxiety because I'm like, honey, I told you.
Resistance.
Yeah, because we got in. She goes, yeah, but I could have done without the anxiety up to the moment in which we got in. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll play the game. Because the whole time I'm like, God, please give me a seat. Give me a seat. I'm gonna get killed.
I hope this
Pray
works.
to God. I'm like,
but see, what you just described is the fun part because that's you getting lost back in the game. And the point of this is not to I'm never going to play the game. No,
I love the
you
game.
get lost in the game, guys. You want to play the actor. You want to get lost in the role.
You love the game. It's just you realize where the energy of the game comes from. Again, the game is a horse and carriage, but if you put the carriage in front of the horse, you're going to have a rough go at it. But if you find out, if you put the horse in front of the carriage, you can actually sit on the carriage and have the horse and the buggy do all the work. You're still on in the game, but now it's effortless and it's experiential. It's a different feel. I'm not trying to get out of this game. I came here. I came here to have this experience. But now I know how it operates.
I do want to say that we came here, obviously, for this experience.
I chose to come here.
But we came here absolutely to awaken. To see through this veil.
Well, what's awakening?
Of what we call human experience.
Awakening is just going into the unknown and seeing it. Now you know it. But once I know it, I need a new unknown. Mm-hmm. So that's awakening. Awakening is just waking up to something you didn't know. So it's constant. It's always happening.
Yeah.
Now, if you're trying to hold on to an old way. I want this to keep happening. That creates the strife and struggle because it's like grabbing onto a branch in the middle of the river as you're going down in a raft, and the river, say it's moving at a level 3 rapids. At some point, the suffering is not because the rapids are at level 3. It's because you're holding onto the damn branch. And that's the strife you hold. If you let go, you'll just enjoy the banging around of the rocks in the water. That's why you're here. You're here to step into the river that you've never been on. And know that if you stay focused and present, you'll know how to get around those rocks and how to steer and how to move.
And that's the thing, trusting.
It's the panic that ends the experience in what we call death.
That knowing, that's that higher awareness. That's that true self.
Yeah.
And then it's when you're in the thinking mind, you're in the character role. And you got to step outside of the character role to find the self. What you think you are is a mind-made self. It's an identity that's been created. And so when you can see the character for what it is, not only is it funny, not only is it mind-blowing to really think about how this all works, but you get a sense of energy where you start to play with the creation. Because now you are putting the energy and the view and the perspective on all the experiences in a way that allows everything to flow. What do I mean by a way that allows everything to flow? You allow it to be. You're not saying this ought to be a certain way. You're just like, no, whatever way it comes and is served, you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah, if you play...
Or you're going to experience it at the fullest.
Yeah, if you play every day as if you're going to a costume party, you're being truthful to yourself because that's all this is. This persona is nothing but a costume. But I also know at the end of the night I take it off. But when I'm in costume, I act as if I'm the role in which I perceive.
Absolutely. That's every day when we go to work.
I don't walk in, in a costume and act drab unless I'm a hobo.
But that's what's so funny. That's the role we play.
Yeah.
So you play your role.
Yeah.
And I'll play my role.
Yeah.
And you allow me to be the character I am, and I'll allow you to be the character you're being. That's the same thing with a father, a son, the therapist, the patient.
Yeah.
The teacher, the student. The student's allowing the teacher to play their role. The teacher's allowing the student to play their role.
Yeah.
And we're in this dance where we're all acting like it's real.
Yeah, and if it's not going well, if you're having a conversation with someone at the bank over the phone and it's not going well, just go, cut. Let's take 5. Let's start this conversation over again. And action. And see how they react. They're like, what the hell are you doing? Well, I don't like the way it was going, so I pulled back and I'm setting the set.
We're going to reshoot this scene.
We're going to reshoot this scene. And it's funny because just adding that little bit of humor in any way you can literally reshoots the scene.
It does.
It changes direction.
That entire
it reframes
conversation
it. And you have the ability to do that, just to change that. And when things are getting heated and you bring some humor into it or some kindness into it, whatever field you want to bring into it.
Vulnerability.
Yeah.
Especially. I notice that a lot. Like I try to be very... I don't try to be vulnerable, but I try to be genuine and I try to open up and share exactly how I'm feeling. And it's very much so interpreted as vulnerability.
Well, what we understand as vulnerable is somebody that doesn't know. And, they're vulnerable, but everyone's vulnerable, right? Everyone
Absolutely.
In the physical realm, we're all vulnerable. If a meteor hits this planet, I don't care how much weight you live at the gym. I don't care if you're the strongest man on the planet. You're not going to survive a meteor. So there's vulnerability. But we don't walk around thinking like, oh, my God, a meteor is going to hit. But everyone innately knows holding on the physical body has vulnerability because it's fleeting. It's always fleeting. I don't care how strong you are, how smart you are. Even my thoughts and the way my brain works and maybe how fast I talk or how slow I talk will shift and change over time. But who cares? One day I'll be talking like this. Even Ram Dass at the end of his life was able to spew out beautiful sayings, but it took him a long time because he had suffered a stroke. But he still knew he didn't know to convey what he didn't know, but the essence of life. And he still did it beautifully. But what's interesting is I remember listening to him later on when he was in in this persona, state, if you will, you had to be patient and not anticipate what he was going to say. And I remember one day, like I remember the first time, I have to be honest, when I listened to him, like, oh my God, it's tough to understand. But because I was used to listening to him a certain way, he was very fluid. So I was almost anticipating what he's going to say because I read a lot of his books, I listened to a lot of his videos. And once he started talking very slow, my mind had to stop anticipating, and I fully became present and listened. And it was the most brilliant thing. I'm like, oh my God. Because before, I was listening to him, but I wasn't. I was shaking my head. I'm like, yeah. Oh, yeah. Then I'm like, I became present. And it was his essence, not even the words, that came through to me. And I'm like, wow, this is what he's trying to convey, and words won't do it. So one would say he chose persona or slipped into it, who knows, to slow it down, to allow the pause in between. Because it made me so uncomfortable to see that it forced me to let go through that uncomfortableness. And then I got it. And it was like, and it was brilliant. It was something wrong with the way I thought it happened, not the way he was acting. And I'm like, wow. And I got it. But I didn't understand it earlier. I'm like, oh, wow. I felt uncomfortable. But now I'm like, just sit there. There was once, I don't know the full story of who it was, but there was once a Buddhist monk that was sitting in front of a large audience. And he was asked by someone, what's the meaning of life? And he just stood there and he smiled. And everyone stood still except for one person started laughing because they got what he was saying. But he didn't say anything. He just he leaned in and went. And it's this essence, this synchronicity, this connection that we all have, that we're all connected to. But then when we jump into the suit, we separate to see ourselves differently. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is this essence that we're all searching for. But there's nowhere to search because you are it. You just simply have to take the costume you wore to the costume party off. And then you see yourself for who you are. Putting the costume on is fun, but there's nothing greater than taking the costume off. And I remember you told me about, like, what's death like?
Oh, that's one of my favorites.
Say it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, this was when I was listening to Ram Dass speak, and he was talking about or I shouldn't go too much into it, so I'll just say how he associated death, or this was shared to him, but somebody said that death is like taking off a tight shoe.
Yes. It's just a slight discomfort is released.
Mm-hmm.
So we die.
And that felt so right when I heard it.
Yeah, so we die.
It resonated with me.
Yeah, we die every time we let go of something without the corporeal aspects of stop breathing and functioning. But yet, the ultimate death, when my corporeal self disappears from this earth, it's going to be like taking off a tight shoe or a costume I've been in too long. It just gets hot and sticky. It's like, I got to get the shit out of there. Mm-hmm. And you step out of it, this is comfortable. But it was fun getting into the costume. When I was at home dressing up early in the evening, I'm like, I couldn't wait to do that, putting everything on. But by the end of the evening, I couldn't wait to get off of it. The span of the early evening heading to the costume party or getting ready to the thing, that is a lifespan in which we have. You're going to take the costume off. And that's who you really are. Who we really are isn't this, but it's what's on the other side of that, the essence of it. But this is just one blimp of experience that we're having. And if you understand that, you'll live it to its fullest because you'll live it in the present moment. Any other place you're living it, it's like sitting on a pot of gold wishing you were rich. If you simply got up and looked down, you're like, oh my God.
There it was.
There it was. And that's the perspective shift.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us tonight, guys.
Yeah. Okay. And if you like our video, please click the subscribe button down below. Thank you. Peace out.